Welcome back to another video. We're here today and we're going to be doing how to set up your quad for the first time. And today we're going to be going through a new build. I'm also going to do a separate video for a bind and fly, which, spoiler for that, when you get a bind and fly, just bind it and fly it. Don't mess around with Betaflight too much. But we'll get into that in the second video. Today we're going to go through how I set up a drone from start to finish. We're going to start out with doing ESC configurator. We're going to do ELRS, updating and flashing the way I do it. And we're going to then go through the Betaflight setup that I do. It's all pretty basic. I generally like to do it as simple and as clean as possible. Not clean. Simple and as quickly as possible. Mostly because I don't feel like doing a whole complicated setup makes a ton of sense immediately. Just because I'm going to do more complicated setups once I fly the drone. Once I get it up in the air, feel comfortable with it, everything's functioning correctly, that's when I'll go back and actually fine-tune the drone and really get it dialed in. So without further ado, I want to go through what I use to set everything up. You need either a laptop or a tablet or pretty much anything that can run Betaflight and a web browser. You also need USB cable, you need the drone itself, a fully charged battery, your remote control, whatever that is, and then your goggles, which mine are somewhere down here. So let's now plug in the drone and get this whole show on the road. Doop. Here we go. The first things first, when you're setting up ESC configurator, which I've got here in the background, you cannot have Betaflight connected. So you can see Betaflight is connected. Can't do that. If Betaflight is connected, ESC configurator behaves super weird. So first, disconnect that. And also of note, when you're using ESC configurator, make sure that your radio is turned off. So let's make that full screen because I don't need anything else in the background. So you can see up here at the top, turn off your radio or else flashing might fail, which we don't want that. So now we're connected. And first thing we need to do before we hit read is plug in a fully charged battery. So we go over here, plug in this battery. First plug into the drone, fired up, got that Millennium Falcon looking engine on the back. I love it. So now we've got that plugged in. So we're going to go down here and hit read settings. And hopefully all of our ESCs come in. Yep, 1, 2, 3. They are already flashed to BlueJay 19. I don't like BlueJay 19. To each their own, but I'm going to come in here and go to flash. I've already selected BlueJay. If you are BLHES, obviously, again, select BlueJay. Do not touch this line. That's basically, it's a specification for your ESC. Do not touch it. It's already set correctly. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to go to the newest version, which is 21. And then for PWM frequency, if I'm flying a tiny whoop, I will go down to 48 or 96 kilohertz, generally 48 for the PWM frequency. Anything bigger than that, whether it's a 24 inch drone. No, a 5-inch drone, a 2-inch drone, anything like that, I generally like to be at the 24 PWM frequency. And then once I've selected that, I go in, hit flash, let it do its business, and then we patiently wait here. While this is flashing, you'll see this stuff update here at the top. So it'll go from 48 kilohertz up here down to 24 kilohertz. Ooh, interesting. I wonder why that's... if it doesn't fly well, we'll switch it. Okay, as that's finishing up, over here we're going to see some different options pop in, and I want to go through them just really quick. You don't really have to touch any of them. So we've got minimum startup power. If your motors don't spin after you flash BlueJay, these two things might be the problem. With whoops, I generally have to bring these to about 1100 for minimum startup power, and then this usually I sit somewhere between like 1200 and 1250. So if your motors don't spin, boost these up and that may help you out. I generally don't touch motor timing. I don't touch demag compensation unless there's a reason to. As you can see here, it's basically the amount at which you can cut the power to keep the motor from basically demagnetizing, basically kind of like failing in a way. Next, you have the beacon settings. So if you want your beep to be louder, stronger, or a delay to your beacon, you can set that all here. Down here under safety settings, you've got ESC power ratings. The only time you should ever change this is if your flight controller and ESC are only 1S compatible. This is basically for the flight controller, not what you're running. So say you have a 1 to 2S ESC, you'd still run 2S plus. If you have an ESC that only supports 1S, then you'd select 1S. Every other time, just leave it for 2S plus, and generally leave it whatever it's set to when you get it. I wouldn't change it all that much. I did have some ESCs that struggle with temperature protection, so if you have a weird power issue that can't really diagnose, this might be worth a try, but it's already disabled by default, which I very much like. And then the braking strength, you can touch that if you want, but I really don't touch any of this aside from these first two options. Again, I'm going to run 24 kilohertz out of the gate. I may end up going to 48 kilohertz depending on how the drone feels in flight, but we're going to start here. So then after this is all done, I hit right settings and let it do its business. It's just like a double check for me. I can also go in here and then go to melody editor because I like to have weird melodies when I fire up my drone. So we're going to see what I'm feeling today. Ooh, kind of feeling something stupid. Let's do, actually I'm going to do the Mario, one of my favorites is the Mario Power Up. Where is it? Super Mario 1-Up. There we go. So I can play all. That's basically what it sounds like. And then we're going to go down here to accept. You have to accept each one available. And then we hit right melody. Once this becomes ungray, you're good to go. Close. One more time, I hit read settings, hit right settings, and we should be good to disconnect. So now I disconnect. There we go. We heard the ESC make its little chirps over there. So I'm going to unplug the battery. There we go. So this little portion's done. Now I'm going to go in and switch back to here. We're going to go to ELRS configurator. I usually like to go to ELRS configurator next because I like to have my RF connected. You can kind of do this in whatever order, but this is my order, so take it as you will. First things first, make sure you select the most recent firmware or the firmware that's applicable to you, because remember, if you're 3.0 or higher, your radio has to be 3.0 or higher. If you're 2, or if you're in 2 point whatever, your radio has to be the same. So if your radio is at 2 whatever, 2.5, you need to make sure you flash your receiver at 2.5. But again, anything modern, if you buy a Boxer, Pocket, etc., you're already going to be on 3.0. So I generally say just go with the most recent firmware. If you haven't updated your receiver and radio, I would definitely recommend trying. We have an So our receiver is the RP4TD True Diversity 2.4 RX. So I'm going to select that guy right there. And I'm not going to do Betaflight or UART pass-through. I don't like either of them personally. I'm going to do Wi-Fi. Then we're going to go down here. And here you can basically see the regulatory domains. If you look in here, if you're in the EU, this used to be labeled as EU or CE, I believe. And then this is the FCC firmware. So if you're in the US, use this 2.4 gigahertz ISM. Here, it's basically if you want to set up your receiver to be able to go to your wireless network. I personally don't. Some people do. Down here, we can see the binding phrase. That's the binding phrase I'm using for this quad. And then this is the default for Wi-Fi device. So that's the IP address basically of my receiver. We're not going to select force flash, and then we're going to go down here and you can choose flash or build. I generally prefer to do build. So we're going to hit build. It's going to do its little business here in the background. Once it's done, it's going to pop up a little folder. Here we go. Little folder here with the title of the receiver here at the top. And next we're going to go into Wi-Fi. So we're going to go up here, go into here, and you're going to see that because I've had my quad plugged in into USB and the receiver is turned on for more than 60 seconds, it'll appear here. Click on that dude. It will connect to that wireless network. Here we go. Good to go. And you can see currently it's at revision 3.1, but we're going to update that. Go over here to update, scroll down, choose our firmware. I'm going to go over here and drag this in here. There we go, firmware.bin, and then hit update. So the upload's super, super fast. And then you're going to see this go to, say, updating once it's done uploading. Here we go, flashed. Hopefully that completed. I usually give it a couple of seconds. And then sometimes you have to unplug it and replug it in. But usually how you can tell, if I come over here. Oh, and actually here, perfect. If you get this, the password, show password, is Express LRS, exactly like that. So join, and we should see, yeah, of course. So it basically hasn't rebooted yet. So now I got my radio fired up, and as you can see, right here, we've got the signal. Now our radio is officially bound and ready to go. I am going to unplug the quad now. Here. Telemetry lost. And we're going to plug the quad back in. I just like to do that little refresh. Recovered. There we go. And now I'm going to turn off the radio again. It's still connected. Yes, I'm sure. Nap time. And we're now going to go into Betaflight. So we're done with setting up the receiver. We're done setting up the ESC. And now it's time to do the big boy of the big boys. So we're going to go in here and go to flash firmware. We're going to auto detect because that seems to work in the past. We're going to go to the most recent version of Betaflight, 4.5.2. Heck yeah. And now we're going to double check some of these. So radio protocol defaults generally from either Crossfire, but if you're using ELRS, Crossfire, Tracer, any of the modern protocols, make sure you have CRSF. If not, you can go in here and add whatever protocol you need. If you're running the DJI thing, you'd obviously go to SBus, but set that up as you need. Telemetry protocol, I just use automatically included, and then motor protocol, make sure this says D-Shot. I've absolutely messed this up, and it defaulted to brushed for me for a while, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with my motors. It was such a pain in the butt. Then the last thing you do is make sure that you've got the appropriate other options in here. So for me, I need the OSD, I need GPS, I need LSD, I need LED strips. That's pretty much all I need from the options that are there. I don't need any special configuration here. It's basically just a little Cinewoop. Now that everything there is set up correctly, I'm going to go in and load firmware. Once the firmware is loaded, I'm going to hit flash firmware, and I am going to create a backup. I generally always recommend creating a backup because sometimes the firmware itself from the manufacturer has some maybe special tweaks or special functionality to it, or is just calibrated correctly. And so I always save a backup, and that's going to be the first thing I do actually post flash. So we're going to hang out here, watch this erase all the firmware on the flight controller, which is a little nerve-wracking, but hey, that's got what we got to do. Take a little sip of coffee while we're waiting. Flashing the firmware. And here I would just recommend the more you do this, the more comfortable you're going to get, but always double check. So when I hit auto detect, I'm using a SpeedyBee F405 AIO. If it said something that I didn't expect there or something didn't seem right, I absolutely double check. Make sure that your target, which is what you're auto detecting there, matches your flight controller. There we go. Programming successful. And I'm going to reiterate this. If you're watching this and you have a bind and fly, do not do any of this. This is a terrible idea if you have a bind and fly. Only do this if you've built the quad and are setting it up brand new. So now we're going to hit connect. You're going to notice that we don't have that thing that says select all default or apply custom defaults. That is an option that's no longer necessary, which is kind of neat. So it's going to say calibrate. I'm struggling today. I'm sorry about that. It's going to say calibrate accelerometer. There we go. That was a nightmare. Now that we flashed the firmware, we're going to go in and do a couple of things right out of the gate. First thing is first, I'm going to load that backup that we just created, just to make sure that any settings that were already applicable get applied. There we go. No big issue there, so we're going to close. Now that we've applied that backup to our flight controller, we're going to go back to ports. We're going to go in here. Receiver is already set to UART6. That's set correctly. I'm going to go in here and set the this right here, MSP on. And I'm going to go under peripherals, make sure this is set to MSP DisplayPort, because this is where our DJI O4 air unit is connected. And then I'm going to go back here to my little wiring diagram, and I believe it is, scroll to where GPS is. GPS. So GPS is on T5. So I'm going to go back to Betaflight and go to UART number 5, and we're going to go to sensor, GPS. I'm just going to leave it at auto, and I'm going to hit save and reboot. Boo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Close. Okay, so now that we have all that set up, I'm going to do the accelerometer because that thing's driving me nuts. Basically, put it on the floor, and this is why I like to use a really, really long, what's it called? Really, really long USB cable to make sure it touches the floor. Hit calibrate accelerometer, and we should be good to go. So now the drone is upright, and now we can actually test the other thing. So I'm going to reset this axis. Switch to the other camera. So basically, you want this drone to match this drone. So if I lean this drone this way, that drone should lean that way. If I lean it this way, it should lean that way. If I tip it back, it should tip back. If I tip it forward, it should tip forward according to that diagram. And you'll see that right now my forward and backward is backwards, and so I am going to have to correct that in the settings. But first, let's go back to it, and let's go into the ports tab. And let's now go under ports. Again, I like to double check everything. Make sure that still says everything I want it to do. Now let's go into configuration. Here we need to set the arming angle to 180 degrees. So that way if we're upside down, we can flip it back over. I hate craft names, so I make sure that's not there. Next, we've got the accelerometer, the barometer, and down here, that's checked. I want LED strip checked. Everything else correct. And RX. So I'm not going to do this yet. Basically, these need to be checked for you to be able to do the beeper, or if your RX loses signal, it automatically beeps. I do this at the very end because setup can be really annoying when your drone is just chirping at you. So we're going to leave that alone for right now. Next, we're going to go back here to presets, and we're going to do these two. These two are probably my favorite two presets. Here, we're going to go in here, and this is going to be cinematic. It's a separate serial receiver, so basically it's not an SPI-based receiver. I like whole pack value. I don't really use this, so it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to leave this alone because I just don't like what it does. If you don't touch it, it's fine. Once that's all done, I'm going to go in here and hit pick. And now it's going to apply all the stuff for ELRS 250 hertz. I run 250 hertz on pretty much all of my ELRS stuff. If you don't run 250 hertz, there are presets for every option for ELRS. Just select the one that works for you. Same goes with Crossfire. If you run Crossfire 50, find the preset for Crossfire 50. It does worlds to make your radio performance a little bit better. So next we're going to go in here. I'm going to map to DisplayPort, set HD OSD. It's all stuff that I want. And I set it to UART number 3. So that's where my O4 air unit is, or where my HD VTX is. Select that. We hit pick and then save and reboot. It's going to apply all those magic preset settings. Perfect. Now that we've got those presets taken care of, I want to double check my receiver because that's usually the next thing I like to deal with. Boo-doo-doot.
Let's not crash too much
today.
Basically,
I like to do everything that I don't. I'd like to do everything that I don't have to do the battery for. I should probably have this away from the microphone. Okay, so first things first is making sure everything works correctly. So basically making sure that when I push the direction that it's going to push, it works. So everything there looks fine. Throttle, yaw, all that looks good. Make sure my switches are working. Sweet. So everything was already working out of the gate, but I'm going to go through my setup anyway, just in case it was not. So I've got serial for receiver mode. That's all set. Crossfire is the receiver protocol. That's what you need. I have telemetry set. That's what I want. That's my channel map. So if your channels aren't behaving correctly, so say you push throttle and your roll moves, it means this channel map isn't correct. You just have to set this the same as your radio, and maybe I'll make a video showing that. Since I've calibrated my sticks correctly, I'm going to switch this down, the low and high thresholds, to basically 10 above the base. So basically it gives a little bit more granularity at the top and bottom. And I think that's everything I do in here. And so I'm going to hit save, make sure all that saves. And next, because we're already powered on the receiver, we're going to go here under modes, and we're going to set up my modes real quick. So first and foremost, basically what I do is I hit add range, I push the button I want, and it auto sets. So then I'm going to move these sliders to the appropriate section, and done. So there's arm off, arm on. So next, I always like to have a backup mode. So I usually use angle, push that all the way forwards. That's where I set my angle switch. And so I basically move this. This is where the current position is. So that's angle mode on, there's angle mode off. And if I go down here and hit save, you'll see that when I flip this switch down, angle mode is off. Flip it up, angle mode on. So that's how you can kind of tell. It won't do that until you hit save. So if doesn't look like it's working correctly. Next, I'm going to do GPS rescue because I will have that. Add range, flip that down because it's a 2-position switch. And I want it towards me is come save me. Up is off. That's the way I like my GPS. Next, we're going to go down here, beeper. Set up my help switch. Oops. Do that, just hit X, switch that. It's in the middle position is where I like my beeper. Next, we're going to go down here to, this is the most important one I feel like, flip over after crash. Mostly because if you don't set this up now, when you do need it, you can't set it up. So make sure that's set up and saved. I like a pre-arm, so we're going to add range, push my momentary switch. So that's set up. Make sure that's good to go. And then I think that's it. Scroll down to make sure I've got everything good there. Okay, so I'm going to hit save, and then I'm going to hit hide unused modes, and I'm going to go through real quick and check everything. So pre-arm, arm, and you can see because I have it plugged into Betaflight, it's disabled. It's a safety feature. Beeper, flip over after crash, GPS rescue. I don't know why that's not lighting up. That's okay. And then angle mode. So angle mode and then air mode is all set. So now that I've got all of my modes set up, next we're going to go to GPS. I'm going to turn off my radio now because I no longer need it. Yes, thank you. And we're going to go in here. uBlocks is the protocol I'm going to use. Auto config, use Galileo, set home point once. So that way, basically, if I crash and I flip over, it's not going to reset that home point. I think that's pretty important. Auto detect ground assistance type. Honestly, I don't have any ground assistance devices currently, but if I did, I want to make sure that I can use them. So I just automatically turn that on. This is going to slowly populate just as it's hanging out here. Now we're going to hit save and reboot. This information will fill in eventually. It usually takes about 10 minutes when you've completely never turned on a GPS before for it to get all that information. But if you want to make sure that it's plugged in and working, you can look up here. So you've got accelerometer, gyroscope, barometer, and GPS. All of that stuff is alive and working. Next, we're going to go down here to OSD because I'm pretty particular about my OSD. So here we go. For this quad, because it's a cinematic quad, I'm basically going to run no OSD more or less. So I've got warnings. I'm going to drag those into the middle. I don't know why this is not being. I'm just going to switch, hit save. Go back here, hit save. I don't know why it was being so weird there. Sometimes it does that weird thing where it's like showing me the standard def. Okay, so we're going to put the warning one all the way down here at the bottom. I'm normally going to have the DJI stuff here, so I really don't need any of that information, like battery voltage, the rest of that from the OSD. I am going to put GPS satellites. I want home direction. And I want, because I don't think so if I'm doing a longer range quad, I will put GPS latitude and longitude on, because then I can go back, watch my DVR and see exactly if I crash where my quad was at exact location. And I think that's all I'm going to put on there, because I really want it to be as clean as possible, just in case for whatever reason I can't use the onboard video. I will still have a mostly usable OSD video. Again, this is only because this is exactly the quad. Or sorry, this is only because this is a very, very specific quad with a very specific purpose. I wouldn't normally set this up like this, because this is a little weird only to have this for a quad that has GPS on it. But we're going to hit save. Now we're going to go into PID tuning. I'm really not going to touch anything. I do not like to touch PID tuning. I do not like to load any kind of preset when I first build up a quad. I basically just go in and I set my rates. So my rates are 700 across the board because I'm a basic bitch. And then I like 2.5 or 0.25 expo on every axis. If this is a whoop, I will adjust my throttle expo. Usually I'm around like 0.25 to 0.3, but for like slightly bigger quads, I'm going to fly this one first and see if I like it. If I feel like the throttle is not behaving the way I want it to, I will come in here and add a little throttle expo. Ciati FPV has some excellent content about how to figure out what your throttle expo should be and what it does, because dialing that in can be fairly difficult, and if you get it wrong, it can feel awful. So everything else looks correct. I do not need a throttle limit, so I'm going to hit save, and that's all I'm doing in the PID tuning tab. Next thing we're going to do is motor alignment. So we're going to go in here and do reorder motors. So we got our drone here sitting next to us, and we're going to hit reorder motors. Yes, I understand. Hit start. Which one's spinning? So it's this one, and the first one's spinning, and the one on the back is spinning, and the one on the front is spinning. So we're going to hit save. Sure, all that's set in copacetic. See if this is okay. So we're going to go in here and go under configuration because we still haven't fixed this. So I'm going to try going in and flipping the pitch, enter, save and reboot. I shouldn't be doing this with the motor stuff, but okay. So nope, that did not what I wanted to do. Let's put this back to 0. Save and reboot. I want to try just go figure, we're trial and erroring this in real time. That works. Okay, that's still backwards. So we're going to configuration, and we're going to do 180 degrees flip. So 180 degrees flip should fix this gyro. Nope, it did not. It made it way worse. So configuration, we're going to try 90 degrees flip. Save. See if that fixes it. So, no. Oh no. Let's try disconnect, reconnect. Okay, so I lean forwards, drone goes forwards, turn left, turn right, tip back. Now it's behaving. So now we're good. Basically what I needed to do was go in here under configuration, and I needed to flip this to 90 degrees flip. I know people who do the arrangement up here. I don't know why. I just prefer using this. It works. It works for me. Everything else looks correct. 180 arm. We're going to end down to motors. So now that our motors are reordered correctly, we're going to do motor direction. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to set bidirectional D-shot on. I agree, because we're running Blue Jay. And I don't need either of these. Motor poles is going to be 12 because that's how many motor poles this motor has. So basically here, for 5-inch motors, usually there are 14 poles, which is why it's the default. 3-inch or smaller, often it's 12 magnets. You can basically count them underneath. I'll show a quick piece of B-roll here. And then I leave everything else alone. I definitely don't turn on 3D for this. I hit save and reboot. And I'm going to now do motor direction. So we're going to go back to motors. And we're going to go to motor direction. I'm aware there's no props. We're going to do wizard, start spinning. And so now basically what I do is I take, all the motors are spinning. I take my finger and touch the motor. So that one's spinning, props out. That's spinning, props out. This one is spinning, props out. This one's spinning, props out. So all of those are spinning, props out. So I'm going to actually reverse all of them. So go over here. That's now props in, props in, props in, and props in. So that's what I want. Stop motors, close. I need to go make sure that this is correct. So that's the direction spinning. It's a quad X. Even though it's a pusher, it doesn't matter. And then we're going to hit down here, I understand. And I'm going to spin up the motors using this to double check that the motors are reversed. So I do the same thing, touch the motor, spinning, props in, props in, props in, props in. I personally like props in. That's kind of a personal preference, is props in, props out. Actually, now I need to go back to this because I don't want to leave my motor spinning. So we're going to go over here, hit stop motors, and we should be good to go. I'm going to go back to now configuration. I'm going to turn on these two, hit save and reboot, and that should be everything. Unplug the battery so my VTX doesn't cook itself completely, and that's it. Here we go. Got the air unit plugged in, battery on board. We have to go fast because this thing overheats like a motherfucker. Cut that out, sorry. So first thing first, the only thing we're going to do in here, start activation. Here we go. Let's start activation. We're in DJI Assistant. Hit start activation. You confirm your email address. You can put whatever you want in here. You can put burgerpoopface95@yahoo.com or I'm super old at AOL.com. Whatever your email address is, you can either put that in as a real address, or if you don't feel comfortable sending your email address to DJI, yeah, we can do that. You can put whatever you want in there, but do remember, if you do link it to your account, it's so much easier when you deal with warranty through DJI. So I would recommend using your actual email, but again, don't feel comfortable sharing it with DJI, you don't have to. You can put in whatever you want literally in there as long as it has an @ and a domain name behind it. Hit confirm account, because that's me. Activation a success. Okay, now that we're all activated, and in here you can see that we get upgrade the firmware. So we're going to go to the most recent firmware, hit update, start update. And the one thing I will recommend is putting a fan on your O4 Air unit because it does get hot real fast. Now that we're completely updated and activated, our O4 is ready to go, and we're ready to bind to the goggles. I'm not going to show you the binding process because it's fairly simple. You just push the bind button on the O4 Air unit or O3 Air unit, and then you push the bind button on your goggles. It's going to be different for each goggle, whether you press and hold I think it's like the power button on the goggles 3, or in the goggles 2 and Integra, there's like a button in the middle of the forehead, between the eyes that you have to press. And then the goggles V2, there's a button like this little like pinhole button that you have to press. Either way, just look up how to bind it. DJI has a good guide. Everybody else has good guides too, so go check it out. But our O4 Air unit is activated, and that's finished that part of the setup process. So we've got our drone all set up, and we're going to go give this a little test fly. Usually I'd say fly this outside, but since this is a little drone and meant to be flown indoors, I feel a little better about doing this. Before we get this down on the ground, I did use the T-mount props. It seems like I probably could have gotten away with press fits similar to this Beta FPV Pavo Pico. As you can see, there's no screws holding it in. But since this guy's going to be a little heavier and it will be flying in proximity to people, I'm just going to go ahead and knuckle under and use the screws. And so let's get this battery on and let's give this a little test whirl. And make sure the contact's the right way up. First things first, we do a quick arm check, and we don't have an arm. So let's go into the goggles and I'm gonna swipe down, hit record. Okay, so as you can see in my goggles, I'm hitting the arm button, and you'll see at the bottom it says GPS. As you can see in the top left corner, I have no satellites because I'm indoors. This is something you may run into as a pilot. What you can do is you can press up on the right control stick left, and you'll go into this. And we're gonna go in here, go to, I think it's features, GPS rescue. Then we're gonna go all the way down here to arm without a fix. We're gonna turn on yes. Back, back, back. Save and reboot. Okay, so what I just did was I used my controller to navigate around the Betaflight menu and enable arm without fix. Now that we can arm indoors, and the reason you don't want to do this is because if you're out in the field and say you do arm this and take off, you potentially can not have a return to home because you'd never set a home point. You can't set a home point unless you have 7 to 8 satellites in Betaflight, so it is worth noting not to leave this active if you rely on return to home. So first things first, let's just arm it. Everything's working, turn it off. I then check things like the beeper. Next, I will rearm. I'm gonna switch it into horizon or level mode, angle mode, I believe it is. Then you're gonna hear the prop spin up a little bit because it's trying to level itself in place. So now we know that that's working. So I'm gonna then next move to testing the directions, which I need to get my, and so here we go. I'm going to go over here, hit record. Now we're gonna test the quad for its basically its props going in the right direction. So I'm going to push left on the stick, left side goes up, push right on the stick, right side goes up. I'm going to come over here to pitch, push forward, it pitches forward, pull back, pitches back, and that's good to go. Now that I know that all my axes work, that usually means that my props are on the right way, the motors are spinning the right way, and that the motors are in the correct order. Because it wouldn't really function correctly. Sometimes it would flip out and like throw itself across the ground, or it'd say run away and shut off, or it may stick itself to the ground. If any of those things are happening, immediately go in, double check your settings in Betaflight, pull your props off, or sorry, first pull your props off, then double check it in Betaflight. But now that we know that everything is working correctly as we would expect, I'm going to give this, as you can see down there at the bottom, GPS rescue off. Little quick test flight. So everything seems to be working correctly. Now I'm going to go for a little bit of a cruise around just to double check. Basically I do this in stages so that way I'm not biting off more than I can chew. Okay, something seems a little off there. As you can see, when I try to take off, it's desperately trying to self-level to one side. So I'm gonna go in here and go on to Betaflight. So we're gonna scroll in here. We're gonna go down to the SpeedyBee app. Then once we have the SpeedyBee app, we're gonna hit connect. There we go. That's the drone. Hit connect. And I'm going to go into... So, ooh, this is all changed. This is kind of nice. Connecting. Skip. We're not going to set a password right now because... Oh, do you want to do that? So what I'm going to do is go in here. Go under... It's under configuration, or is it under this guy up here? There it is, calibrate accelerometer. So you can see that the model looks like it's off, but the model is currently flat on the ground. I don't know if this is because the flight controller is positioned a little weird or what have it, but we're gonna hit that. So now the drone is set level, and we're gonna give this another test fly. So I'm gonna go back to the goggles. Put it back in angle mode. OMSP. Oh, yep, sorry. First I need to disconnect. Here, we're learning things all the time. Now that we're disconnected from Betaflight. So now you can hear that the quad is a little bit quieter in angle mode. There we go. I'm just going to do a little cruise around, feeling out the altitude, not doing any freestyle because again, this is not really the quad for it. I will push it eventually, but this is really just to get an overall feel, make sure everything is bolted together correctly. And when I come back down, I will do a bolt check, make sure everything is good to go. So maiden flight is all done for this guy. We're good to go. So I'm just gonna unplug it, do a bolt check, and then I'm gonna start flying it. Give a couple of batteries through, probably 10 or so. If I feel like something is not right as far as the drone goes, like something doesn't feel like it's performing quite correctly, then I'll go in and tune it after about 10 or so batteries. So that's pretty much it. Now it's basically time to go out and get some batteries through it. I'll fly about 10 packs or so in both angle and in acro mode, mostly in acro mode because I really do prefer flying in acro mode versus angle mode because just I'm more precise, I have better field, better control, all the rest of that stuff. Once I get through those 10 batteries, if I feel anything weird or any issues with the flight performance, then I'm going to go back and tune and change whatever I feel like I need to change to eliminate that problem with its flight. So far on this first flight, everything feels locked in. So maybe I won't change anything, but I can't really tell until I go out and actually start pushing it, doing some split S's, doing some basic maneuvers. This isn't a freestyle quad, so I'm not going to be doing matty flips and inverted yaw spins, but I will be doing split S's. I'll be doing probably some power loops just to make sure that for all of the maneuvers I might do for a cinematic project, it feels comfortable, locked in, and solid, because that is essentially what I need from a cinematic drone, is performance that is consistent. So with that said, thank you all for joining me. I'll catch you in the next one. As always, links are down below. Those are affiliate links for what I use. I do not sell you anything I don't personally use, so again, helps this channel out if you use them. If you don't worry about it. Thank you all for joining me. Like, subscribe, comment, be ready for the next one. The next video up is going to be the setting up my bind and fly. So this guy right here, process is pretty similar, but it's really just the binding portion and the flying portion. So join me next week for that. Catch you on the next one. Bye.